The bell above the diner door gave a tired jingle. A man stepped in, shoulders stooped beneath a weathered coat, gray stubble catching the neon hum. His shoes were cracked, his hands raw from cold. But his eyes, calm, blue, watchful, carried a weight the room didn't understand. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if time itself waited for him. The manager behind the counter barely looked up. "We don't do handouts," he said, before the man had even spoken. The man nodded once. "I was hoping for coffee," he said quietly. "Then pay like everyone else," came the reply. No one knew that under the frayed sleeves and threadbare gloves was a billionaire's watch, hidden beneath kindness and silence. And this morning, silence was about to be tested. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and quiet disappointment. Vinyl seats are torn at the edges. A flickering sign that said open, but felt like a lie. The hum of the fridge filled the empty spaces where conversation should have lived. It was morning rush, or what passed for one. A few truckers, a nurse still in scrubs, and a tired mother whispering to her child. All of them kept to themselves, pretending not to notice the man who didn't belong. He walked with careful grace, his coat brushing against the linoleum. Sat at the corner booth, the one nearest the window where sunlight fought through Grime Street glass. His reflection was ghostly, pale, and patient. Behind the counter, the manager, Rick, chewed his gum like a challenge. Mid-40s, slick-back hair thinning under the fluorescent buzz. His name tag, crooked, red manager in fading red print. His smirk said more. He leaned toward the waitress. "Keep an eye on that one," he muttered. "Smells like a shelter." The waitress, Clarice, froze mid-pour. She was in her 50s, with thin wrists and soft movements from years of service. Her eyes carried the tired kindness of someone who had learned to survive rudeness by shrinking under it. "He just ordered coffee," she said carefully. Rick snorted. "Coffee's for paying customers." She hesitated. "He hasn't." "Then ask him. Don't make me do it." Clarice toned, clutching the pot like a peace offering. Steam rose in soft curls as she approached the booth. "Morning," she said gently. "Would you like cream or sugar?" The man looked up, his eyes kind, his voice quiet. "Just black. Thank you." He slid a single crumpled bill toward her, enough for the coffee and a tip most people wouldn't bother leaving. Her shoulders eased. "I'll bring it right over." Rick's voice cut through the hum. "You'd better check that money's real." The diner chuckled, low, mean laughter. Someone muttered, "These people try anything." Clarice's face flushed, but she didn't respond. She just poured the coffee, placed it before the man, and whispered, "I'm sorry." He smiled faintly. "Don't be." From the booth near the back, a young busboy watched. 16, maybe 17, mop handle leaning beside him. He'd seen this before. Rick was picking targets, testing who would stand up, and no one ever did. The man took a sip, closed his eyes briefly, as if tasting more than coffee, the bitterness of memory, maybe. Outside, a limo idled a few blocks away, black paint gleaming beneath the pale morning light. A driver inside checked his watch, waiting for a signal that hadn't come. Back inside, Rick leaned over the counter again. "Hey, buddy," he called. "You planning on sitting there all day?" The man didn't look up, "Just until I finish this." Rick's smirk widened. "Then drink fast." The diner's chatter returned, forced, awkward. People stared at plates, pretending not to see. Clarice wiped the counter harder than she needed to. The busboy lowered his gaze. The man at the window just sat still, hands wrapped around his cup, the steam fogging his reflection. Every movement, every sound, deliberate, measured, like he'd been here before 100 times in 100 different diners, testing the same thing each time. How people treat those they think can't fight back. Rick laughed suddenly. "You know, I don't even know why they let your kind in here. We run a business, not a charity." Clarice froze. The nurse in the corner shifted uncomfortably. The man's voice was quiet but steady. "Your kind?" "Yeah," Rick said. "The ones who think pity's a currency." The man smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Sometimes it's worth more than you think." Rick scoffed. "Whatever. Finish up and get out. We've got real customers coming." He toned. snapping at the busboy to clear a nearby table. The kid jumped, but as he walked away, the man in the coat spoke softly, not to argue, not to beg, but to remind. "I used to think that too," he said. "That kindness had a price tag." Rick didn't hear him. No one did, or pretended not to. Only Clarice paused. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped the cup. Her eyes glanced toward the man, who looked poor but spoke as if he remembered wealth. The diner clock ticked too loudly. A truck rumbled by outside. Somewhere, a phone buzzed with a message no one had noticed yet. The man folded the napkin beneath his cup, his movement slow, deliberate, like signing something invisible. Clarice brought the bill, though she didn't need to. "Here you go," she murmured. "No rush." He nodded, reaching into his coat pocket, and for a moment, the glint of a silver pen caught the light. She didn't recognize the emblem. No one did. Not yet. The clock above the counter ticked louder now, like it was counting down to something no one could see. Clarice refilled the coffee quietly. The man's hands trembled faintly, not from weakness, from patience worn thin by years of watching arrogance parade his strength. He didn't sip this time, just stared into the black surface. Reflected there was Rick's smate, stretched like grease across glass. "You planning to pay for refills too?" Rick said, leaning on the counter, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, we just run a charity drive today." The laughter came again. Soft, cruel, comfortable. Clarice flinched. The busboy froze mid-step. The man finally looked up. "I already paid," he said, voice low, steady. "You can check." Rick grabbed the receipt off the counter, waving it like a flag. "Yeah? And what about the mess you're leaving behind? You think people like you clean up after yourselves?" The busboy swallowed hard. I can wipe it, sir." Rick turned on him fast. "Did I ask you?" The kid fell silent. The diner's radio crackled softly, old soul music playing like it didn't belong here anymore. A voice sang about mercy no one practiced. Rick leaned closer to the booth. "Listen, pal," he said, his tone shifting from mockery to menace. "We don't need your kind scaring customers off. So why don't you take your coffee in?" "Rick." Clarice's voice broken, shaking but firm. "He paid. He's not bothering anyone." He turned on her. "You want to lose another shift, Clarice?" Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer, just turned back toward the sink, eyes glossy but proud. The man watched the exchange quietly, taking in every tone, every flicker of power. His hand brushed the pocket of his coat, where the silver pen rested against a folded document. A name signed on that paper could change his place forever. But not yet. He wanted to see how deep the rut went. Rick smiled again, tapping the counter with his knuckle. "Finish up and move on. I don't want to smell that coat another minute." The man looked down at it. The coat was worn, yes, but clean, cared for, a relic of his father's, sewn by hand when he was a boy, a reminder that value wasn't always visible. He met Rick's eyes. "You seem angry," he said softly. "Angry? Nah." Rick grinned. "Just allergic to freeloaders." The busboy whispered, barely audible, "That's not fair." Rick's head snapped. "What did you say?" The kid froze. "Nothing. So." Clarice's voice came again, small but strong. He said it's not fair. The room went silent. Rick's jaw clenched. "You're both real comedians, huh?" He stepped closer to the man's booth, close enough for the smell of cheap cologne to drown out the coffee. "Get out." The man didn't move, just lifted the cup, took one calm sip, then set it down. Rick slammed his hand on the table. The cup jumped, spilling a thin stream across the napkin, black liquid bleeding into the white. But the man didn't flinch. Only his eyes changed, not anger, not fear, something colder, sadder. "Do you treat everyone like this?" he asked, "or just the ones who can't defend themselves?" Rick smirked. "The ones who don't belong." Clarice's whisper was barely there. "Everyone belongs somewhere." Rick glared. "You're lucky I don't replace you with someone who doesn't talk back." The man stood slowly. The diner fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Even the radio seemed to pause between songs. He reached for a napkin, the same one that had soaked the spilled coffee, and began writing something with his silver pen. Each stroke deliberate, elegant. Ink flowed smoothly, too smoothly for a man without means. Clarice leaned closer. "Sir, you don't have to." He smiled gently. "It's all right." He finished writing, folded the napkin once, and slid it across the table toward her. "Keep this," he said quietly. Rick laughed. "What is that?" A note of apology. The man toned, his eyes meeting Rick's with a kind of stillness that felt dangerous. "A reminder," he said, "for when the bill comes due." Rick scoffed. "Get out before I call security." The man nodded once. "You should." And then he walked toward the door. Each step seemed to echo. The nurse in the corner pretended to look at her phone but watched closely. The busbow's hands trembled on the mop handle. Clarice stood frozen, napkin in hand, heart pounding. The bell over the door rang softly as the man stepped out. The cold morning air rushed in behind him, curling through the diner like a ghost. Rick exhaled sharply. Finally, God, what a smell. He turned to the waitress. Clarice tossed whatever he touched. She didn't move, just unfolded the napkin. Her breath caught, written in flowing ink, "Kindness costs nothing, but cruelty collects interest." Below it, a signature, not a name she recognized, but one she felt she should read. The busboy leaned closer. "Who's that?" Before she could answer, the sound of an engine echoed from outside. Deep, smooth, too expensive for this street. Rick frowned, moving toward the window. "What the—" A sleek black limousine rolled to a stop in front of the diner. Its door opened with a hydraulic hiss. The man in the weathered coat stepped out, the morning sun catching the glint at his watch this time, the logo unmistakable. The driver followed, holding a tablet. "Sir, shall I proceed?" The man nodded once. "Yes, it's time." Rick's voice cracked through the glass. "What's going on?" The man looked up, eyes meeting Rick's through the window. Calm, cold, final. Then he reached into his coat and tapped a small A-piece. "Activate B," he said, and the diner went still. For a moment, the only sound was a whisper of the limo's engine idling in the cold. Then, doors opened. Two men in dark suits stepped out. Not the kind of men who asked the directions. The kind who arrived with purpose and left silence behind. Inside the diner, Rick blinked. What is this?" Clarice backed away from the window, napkin still trembling in her hand. The busbow's mop clattered to the floor. The man, still in the same tattered coat, didn't look at anyone yet. He just adjusted his cuff, letting the sleeve fall back to reveal the full gleam of the watch now visible under the sunlight. No one in that diner had ever seen a timepiece like that up close. It wasn't the kind you buy. It's the kind you inherit. The suits entered first. One spoke briefly into a headset, scanning the room with a calm, precise glance. The other walked straight to Rick. "Are you the manager?" Rick hesitated. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Mr. Reed will be joining you." "Who?" Rick said, half laughing, half panicked. The door opened again. The man stepped back inside, but this time everything about him felt different. The posture straightened. The calm was no longer restrained. It was commanded. Clarice's breath caught. She looked from the napkin to the man, then back again. "Oh my God," she whispered. Rick frowned. "Wait, you? The man smiled softly. "Yes, He removed the old coat, folding it neatly over his arm. Beneath it was a tailored vest, not new, but timeless, hidden all morning beneath pretense. The transformation wasn't dramatic, yet somehow the room itself seemed smaller. Rick's smirk evaporated. "Is this some kind of joke?" The man tilted his head. "I don't joke about dignity." One of the suited men handed him a leather folder. He opened it slowly, laying papers on the counter. The title printed at the top read, "Acquisition Notice, Harrow Hospitality Group." The diner's name was listed beneath. Rick's face drained of color. What is this?" The man met his gaze evenly. "This location, along with 6 others, was purchased last week. I wanted to see how it operated before making changes." Clarice covered her mouth. You mean? Yes, the man said softly. I'm the new owner. The room was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ribs and makes you hear your own heartbeat. Rick stumbled over his words. You came in here pretending to be homeless? That's entrapment or something. The man set the pen from early on the counter. No, he said gently. It's observation. He turned slightly toward Clarice. You offered kindness even when it cost you comfort. Her eyes welled. You didn't look away, he said. That's all I needed to see. Rick's voice rose, cracking with panic. This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here and pull this stunt. You don't know how hard I work. The man cut him off, his voice low but firm. I know exactly how hard people like her work, and how people like you make it harder. Rick flinched. The busboy spoke up suddenly, timid but brave. Sir, is always like this, yelling, making her cry sometimes. Rick spun. Shut it, kid. The man's tone didn't change, but the air did. No, he said. Let him speak. The boy swallowed, then continued. He said we shouldn't serve people who look cheap. He throws away food if it's for charity. Clarice whispered, Eli. But the boy didn't stop. He said kindness makes a place look weak. The man turned to Rick. Did you say that? Rick's face reddened. I said what needed saying. This is a business, not a charity. You can't pay bills with sympathy. The man's expression softened, not pity, but sorrow. You're wrong, he said. Kindness isn't weakness. It's infrastructure. Rick scoffed. Spare me the philosophy. You don't know what it's like trying to keep this dump afloat. The man took a slow breath, tapping the folder. I built empires from less than this, but never by stepping on people. He looked toward the window, where his limo waited. You see that car? Rick followed his gaze. Yeah. Every time I ride in it, I remind myself it's just metal and glass. You strip it away, and I'm the same man who once swept floors in places like this. The only difference, he said quietly, is who showed me grace when I had nothing. Clarice's eyes glistened. Rick sneered, desperate now. You think you can walk in and humiliate me? The man met his glare calmly. No, you did that yourself. He turned to one of the suited men. Please call in the inspectors. The agent nodded and stepped outside, speaking into his headset. Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up. Two officials stepped out, health and labor inspectors, wearing navy jackets with state seals. Rick stammered, Wait a second. You can't just... The billionaire didn't even raise his voice. You've been reported for violations, unpaid overtime, expired goods, and employee mistreatment. I wanted to confirm it firsthand. Clarice whispered, It's true. We told corporate months ago. No one listened. He nodded softly. They will now. Rick's mouth opened, but no sound came. His arrogance collapsed into disbelief. You can't do this to me, he finally managed. You don't understand. I got kids. The man sighed. Then maybe you'll understand what it means to feed someone who can't pay you back. He turned away from him, voice quieter now. Kindness isn't optional. It's the rent we owe each other for being alive. Outside, inspectors began walking the perimeter, clipboards out. The nurse at the back table whispered to the mother beside her, It's really happening. Clarice stood still, napkin still in hand, as if afraid to breathe. Rick's voice came again, cracked and desperate. Look, I made a mistake, okay? I didn't know who you were. The man faced him fully now. That's exactly the problem. Rick blinked. What? You shouldn't need to know someone's worth before deciding to treat them with respect. The words landed like thunder. The busboy whispered, Wow. The man walked toward the door again, slow, deliberate, his coat folded neatly over his arm. But before stepping out, he turned back one last time. Clarice, he said softly, you're in charge now, temporarily. My office will reach out by morning. She shook her head, overwhelmed. Sir, I don't... I can't. You already did the hardest part, he said. You cared. She wiped her eyes, nodding. Thank you. Rick stood there, deflated, his clipboard hanging useless at his side. The man stepped outside again, the wind catching his hair, the city waking behind him. He placed a hand on the limo door, paused, then looked up at the diner sign, flickering weakly in the gray light. He took out the silver pen, pressed it once against the glass door, carving 3 small letters into the condensation. KND. Kindness. A reminder for whoever walked in next. The driver opened the door. So, he nodded once. Proceed. And as the limo pulled away, Clarice stood at the window, hand over her heart, watching the reflection fade. Inside, the napkin with his message lay on the counter, the ink spreading slightly in the steam of fresh coffee. Outside, justice had just begun. The diner didn't open the next morning. A sheet of paper was taped to the glass, closed for inspection. Inside, the hum of refrigerators had been replaced by the slow shuffle of inspectors and quiet voices taking notes. Rick sat in a booth near the back, his shirt wrinkled, his confidence gone. Clarice stood near the door, clutching her apron like armor. The busboy hovered near the sink, not sure if he should stay or leave. Then the door opened. The same man walked in, no disguise this time. Crisp shoot, clean lines, presence commanding but not loud. The same calm eyes that once are behind fatigue now gleamed with quiet authority. Every head turned. Clarice gasped softly. Mr. Reed. He smiled faintly. Morning. The inspectors straightened. One stepped forward. Mr. Reed, we've completed our preliminary review. There are numerous violations. He nodded. I expected as much. Proceed. Rick rose slowly. Look, I didn't mean to. Reed held up a hand. Don't apologize to me. You didn't wrong me. Rick froze. Reed turned to the room. You wronged them. The people who show up every day hold this place together while you call it yours. Clarice's voice trembled. We didn't think anyone cared. Reed smiled softly. They will now. He motioned to one of the suited men beside him. The man opened a folder and began reading aloud. Effective immediately, Mr. Rick Dawson is suspended pending further review for misconduct, employee abuse, and financial negligence. Interim management will be assumed by Clarice Miller. Clarice nearly dropped the paper when it was handed to her. Sir, I don't know what to say. Start with a smile. Reed said, it suits you better than fear. A laugh broke through the tension, small, honest, trembling with disbelief. The busboy clapped once before catching himself. Rick slammed his hand on the table. You think this fixes anything? You think you can walk in here and make a show of? Reed's gaze cut through him. This isn't a show. It's a lesson. Rick's breath hitched. Reed leaned closer, his tone quiet but sharp. You forgot that people remember how you make them feel long after they forget your title. He turned to the inspectors. Release your report to my office. We'll handle restitution directly. One nodded. Yes, Mr. Reed. Rick's voice was small now. Please, I need this job. Reed looked at him, not with anger, but with a deep, human sadness. You needed perspective more. Rick opened his mouth again but said nothing. Reed turned away, walking toward the window where sunlight now spilled through clean glass. Clarice had wiped it herself that morning. The napkin with his handwriting, kindness costs nothing, but cruelty collects interest, was now framed beside the register. He paused there, looking out at the street. Life moved on, indifferent yet alive. Cars passed. A mother held her child's hand, and laughter from somewhere down the block drifted faintly in. He spoke softly, almost to himself. People forget that power is alone, not a possession. Clarice stepped closer. You could have fired everyone. Shut us down. Why didn't you? Reed smiled. Because destruction's easy. Repair takes courage. She nodded, eyes glassy. Thank you for seeing us. He turned back toward her. You saw me first. A hush fell. Even Rick couldn't meet his gaze. Reed glanced once more at the framed napkin, then reached into his pocket. He placed a check on the counter. 6 figures, the diner's full renovation fund. 4 new floors, he said, and a new culture. Then he looked to the busboy. You said it wasn't fair. Keep saying that. The world needs more voices that don't go quiet. The boy smiled shyly. Yes, sir. Reed buttoned his coat. This place is hot. It just forgot to listen. As he stepped outside, the bell over the door rang again, the same tired jingle as before, but somehow it sounded different now. Clearer, lighter. The limo waited at the curb. He didn't rush. Behind him, Clarice flipped the sign on the door. Not closed, not yet open. Just one word, rebuilding. And for the first time in years, it felt true. 3 days later, the diner reopened, not to customers, but to investigators, auditors, and lawyers. Clipboards, cameras, questions. The old neon sign outside flickered like it didn't know what kind of place it belonged to anymore. Rick sat alone in the same corner booth where he used to bark orders. This time, no one served him coffee. His clipboard was gone, replaced by a single white envelope, corporate seal embossed in gold. Termination notice. He hadn't even opened it. Through the window, he could see the reflection of the man he'd mocked. Daniel Reed, the billionaire he'd mistaken for a vagrant, now stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, speaking quietly with Clarice. No cameras, no press, just people doing the slow, humble work of repair. Clarice's hair was tied back, her expression focused but soft. The busboy, Eli, was there too, taking notes, sweeping floors, asking questions like a student eager to learn. Rick's reflection looked older somehow, meaner, the kind of man he swore he'd never become. Mr. Dawson. The voice behind him made him jump. A woman in a navy suit stood there, one of Reed's legal advisors. Her tone was calm, professional. You'll need to sign this acknowledgement for your severance package. It includes a non-retaliation clause and a recommendation for retraining should you apply for future management roles. Rick blinked. You mean I'm terminated? Yes, she said evenly, but not discarded. He scoffed. Is that supposed to make me feel better? She studied him a moment. No, it's supposed to give you a chance. Rick looked down at the papers. His hands shook. You people think you're saints. She didn't answer, just left the folder on the table and walked away. Across the room, Daniel leaned against the counter, watching the slow bustle of quiet change. Walls being scrubbed, a new sign going up, employees being briefed on fair wage policies. Progress doesn't always roar, he said softly. Sometimes it just breathes. Clarice glanced at him. You really mean to keep this place open? He nodded. Of course. But after what happened? That's why it stays open, Daniel said. Because people deserve a second chance. Even the ones who forget what decency sounds like. Her eyes softened. Even Rick. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the booth where Rick sat, hunched over his severance packet. Let's see if he wants to earn it. He walked over quietly. Rick stiffened when he saw him. Here to watch me sign my humiliation. Rick muttered. Daniel shook his head. Here to offer you work. Rick laughed bitterly. You fire me, then offer me a job? You got some twisted sense of humor. I'm not offering your old job, Daniel said. That one required authority. This one requires humility. Rick frowned. What kind of job? Daniel slid a small envelope across the table. Community rehabilitation program. Homeless outreach. They need volunteers with management experience. Rick stared at the envelope, then up at Daniel. You expect me to work with them? Daniel smiled faintly. You already met one of them. You just didn't recognize him. Silence. Rick looked away, swallowing hard. I don't know if I can do that. Daniel nodded slowly. Then you'll stay the man you were, not the one you could be. Rick stayed at the table. The napkin, kindness costs nothing, but cruelty collects interest, was framed on the wall across from him. The words seemed to burn. After a long moment, he reached for the envelope. I'll think about it. That's all I ask, Daniel said. He turned to leave, but Rick's voice stopped him. Why'd you do it? Why test us like that? Daniel paused, because character shows when power's invisible. Rick looked down again, ashamed. Daniel stepped outside, breathing in the city air. The limo waited at the curb, but he didn't enter right away. Instead, he walked around to the alley behind the diner, the same place he'd slept once, decades ago, when he was just another forgotten man. He ran a hand along the cold brick wall, the old graffiti still half visible under peeling paint. Same walls, he whispered, different hearts. Back inside, Clarice gathered the new crew. Her voice shook at first, but steadied with purpose. We're starting fresh. No more yelling. No more fear. If someone needs a meal and can't pay, we'll make it work. This place will feed more than stomachs. Applause, small, scattered, but real. Eli grinned. You sound like him. She smiled. That's the idea. Hours later, when the inspectors finally left and the last paper was signed, Daniel returned one last time. He found Clarice wiping the counter. You did good, he said. We did, she corrected. He smiled. Keep that sign. Rebuilding. Don't change it. I won't. As he turned to leave again, Rick emerged from the back, envelope in hand. Mr. Reed, he called. Daniel stopped. Rick's voice was quiet, raw. I'll take the job. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Good. Rick swallowed. I don't deserve it. No one starts by deserving redemption, Daniel said. They earn it by choosing it. Rick nodded, tears barely hidden. Thank you. Daniel's voice was gentle. Don't thank me. Thank the next person you help. He walked toward the door, coat slung over his arm again, the same way he'd walked in days earlier. Only now, the silence that followed him wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. The new sign flickered once, then steadied. Kindness lives here. Rick stepped to the window, watching Daniel's limo pull away, reflection falling across his own tired face. He whispered, Guess we all get tested sooner or later. And for the first time in years, he didn't sound bitter. He sounded ready. 2 months later, the diner didn't look like the same place. Gone were the flickering bulbs, the greasy floors, and the sour air of resentment that used to hang in every booth. Now, sunlight streamed through clean windows. Plants sat on the sills. Laughter, real, unforced laughter, bounced between the walls. A hand-painted sign hung by the door, the half where everyone eats. Clarice stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for a group of regulars. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, her apron spotless. The tiredness in her eyes was still there, but softened by purpose. Eli rushed past, balancing 2 plates of pancakes like a pro. Table 4's all smiles again, he said, proud. Clarice grinned. You're getting good, kid. Learning from the best, he said, then lowered his voice. He's here again. Clarice toned. The limo was parked outside. Daniel Reed stepped out, no disguise this time. No cap, no ragged coat. Just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, and a warmth in his eyes that made everyone stand a little taller. When he entered, the diner paused, not in fear or but in quiet respect. Morning, Mr. Reed, someone called. He smiled. Morning? It's nearly noon. You're all running late. Laughter filled the room. He took his usual seat at the counter. Clarice, you got any of that pie left? Just for you, she said, plating a generous slice. As she set it down, she leaned in. His coming too. Daniel looked at her curiously. Rick! She nodded toward the door. Rick Dawson walked in, not in a suit, not in his old arrogance. He wore a simple polo shirt, a name tag from the Outreach Center pinned to his chest, Volunteer Supervisor. He looked different, not younger, not richer, but lighter. He paused by the door, uncertain, then walked over to Daniel's counter seat. Mind if I sit? Daniel gestured to the stool. Please. Rick exhaled. You weren't kidding about hard work. Daniel smiled. You showed up every day. Didn't miss one, Rick said. We rebuilt 3 shelters, trained 12 people for jobs. And he hesitated. I learned what I used to call laziness was actually survival. Daniel nodded slowly. Perspective changes everything. Rick rubbed the back of his neck. I wanted to say thank you for not giving up on me. I wouldn't have blamed you if you did. Daniel looked at him for a long time. You didn't need my forgiveness, Rick. You needed your own. Rick's voice cracked a little. Maybe I finally own some. Before Daniel could reply, Eli appeared with 2 cups of coffee. For the men who taught me everything I know, he said proudly. Rick chuckled. You're gonna put us out of work one day, kid. Eli shrugged. Guess that's the point. Laughter again. Easy, healing laughter. Clarice leaned on the counter, watching the 3 of them. Her heart felt full, not because everything was perfect, but because everything wasn't, and yet somehow they'd kept going anyway. The bell above the door jingled again. A woman in a patched coat stepped in, holding the hand of a small boy. She looked nervous. I don't have much, she said softly, just wondering if... Before she could finish, Clarice smiled. Sit anywhere you like. Breakfast on the house today. The woman's eyes widened. Really? Really, Clarice said. Daniel watched the exchange and leaned toward her. You've built something good here. Clarice shook her head. We did. Daniel looked around. The laughter, the warmth, the sound of forks clinking against plates, and nodded. Then I'd say the experiment worked. Rick smirked. Experiment? Daniel sipped his coffee. I wanted to see if kindness could be taught. Turns out it just needed room to breathe. Outside, the city hummed. Taxis, chatter, music from a street performer drifting through the door. Eli looked out and said, Think people will remember what happened here? Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe not the details, but they'll remember the feeling. That's what changes things. He stood, leaving a folded check under his saucer. Rick reached for it out of habit, but Daniel shook his head. Not for you to see. Rick chuckled. Still keeping secrets, huh? Daniel's grin softened. Some are better discovered later. As he left, Eli peeked under the saucer anyway. His eyes went wide. Clarice, he whispered, holding up the check. It's made out to the half. For $100,000. Clarice's jaw dropped. He did it again. Rick just laughed, shaking his head. Guess some lessons never stop paying interest. Clarice smiled through tears. And some debts you don't mind owing forever. They all looked out the window. The limo had already disappeared into traffic, like a ghost from a different life. But the light it left behind stayed. Later that evening, after the last plate was washed and the sign flipped to close, Rick locked the door and turned to Clarice and Eli. You know, he said, we should start serving dinner next month. Maybe partner with the shelter. Clarice raised a brow. You volunteering? Rick smiled. You bet. Eli grinned. Then we'll need a new motto. Clarice thought for a moment, then pointed at a framed napkin on the wall, the one Daniel had left that day. Already got one, she said. The napkin read, Kindness costs nothing, but cruelty collects interest. They stood there for a moment. 3 people who had once been strangers, now bound by something bigger than luck or wealth, a shared redemption. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the glass. But inside, the light stayed warm. Rick flipped off the last switch and murmured, almost to himself, Let's keep the light on, yeah? Clarice nodded. Always. Eli locked the door behind them. The half sign glowed steady in the drizzle, not as a restaurant, not as a business, but as a reminder that sometimes the richest man in the room is the one who remembers what it felt like to be hungry. Moral of the story, true wealth isn't measured by what you have. It's measured by what you give when no one's watching. Kindness doesn't need to be owned. It needs to be remembered. Every act of compassion plants a seed that can rebuild what cruelty destroys. Question to ask you when you see someone being mistreated. Do you look away, or do you step in and change the story?